was like raining. Oh.
Yeah, it's extra cold when it's the wet cold from the moisture in the atmosphere.
You're in New York? Is that what I heard? Or
I was when we had our cold 4th of July. Yes, I was in New York, but Megan is in San Diego, so she's just getting the coastal.
Oh, I was gonna
coastal effect.
I was gonna guess like you're in San Francisco or someplace like that.
I know, right? What's that? How does that saying go? The coldest winter I ever had was the summer in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
Well, while we're cooking over here in the foothills, you're putting on jackets.
Yeah. Right. Hi,
Hello,
Thea.
yeah.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Sound great.
Yes.
Loud or just loud, clear?
Loud. You're really loud.
Appropriate volume.
Okay, I'll turn it down.
Volume is completely acceptable for the activity at hand.
Thea, as we're waiting people to join, thank you for helping us out with some of the points today. Appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
How's your week been, Thea?
You know, the farm is going well. I just ate my first tomato for lunch.
Delish.
Oh.
Always a happy day to have fresh tomatoes for the summer.
That's amazing. I don't have any ripe ones yet, Thea. That seems good.
Well, if you carpool with me in August, maybe I'll share some.
Will you have figs by that point too?
Oh yeah. That'll be right in the middle of the fig season. So also those.
Oh, okay.
Not that I'm trying to bribe you. If you're a good driver, I'll ride with you.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Definitely.
I am. I don't have Caleb or Sean. Normally I am the driver of Caleb, Sean. I'll do a lot of the driving. So there's no one here to attest to my driving skills. But yes, it deserves figs.
So furring. Hi, James.
Hello.
Been a while. Like 48 hours.
Was it yesterday? The day before? No, I saw Caleb yesterday. Okay.
Yeah.
I saw you on Tuesday or last week or something. Yeah. All the task force, the subcommittees are turning to blur. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, happy Friday. You definitely earned a weekend. We need one more. I think it's going to be Leah. Darlene is sick and Doria is unlikely to make it. So we need Leah to join us. Well, we need Leah to join us to take action, which our only action is approval of the meeting summary. So it's 1:04. I say we go one more minute till 1:05 and then possibly launch. Here comes Leah. Look at that, right on time. Okay, let's get going. Greetings, everyone. Happy Friday. This is a meeting of the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force, the Grants and Resources Subcommittee. We are scheduled to go until 3 o'clock this afternoon. My name is Megan Wiley. I am a facilitator with Sacramento State University supporting the task force. And we also have with us Camille Frazier with California Strategic Growth Council calling in from the conference room. You can see her on the screen. So we're here to support the task force. And we also have a guest speaker, Tim Bryant with DOC. We'll introduce Tim in a second. For folks joining us online, these are our standard participation guidelines. We generate and mutually foster a space where we can share, listen, and learn to one another. And there's many different ideas and experiences that find their way into our conversation. And those are what make our conversations really rich and robust. And so we respect different perspectives throughout our process. And always important to stay on point, especially per Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requirements. Today's discussions are focused on topics related to grants and resources. If you would like to make a public comment on any of our agendized sessions, which we have 2 today, plus a general public comment session, you can complete the form here you see online, sgc.ca.gov /meetings-events. Or you can use your raise hand feature and we'll know you want to jump in the comment queue. And where do you find your raised hand? On your Zoom toolbar, likely in the bottom towards the right under the raised hand icon, or hiding under a heart, or hiding under a smiley face reaction. You have to poke around there. All folks who are just members of the public and not subcommittee members or guest speakers are entering the meeting as attendees. So when it's time for public comment, we'll unmute you and let you know when it's time to speak. And cameras are optional, but I love smiles. I say that every time and it's still true. So welcome to join us on camera. Our plan is approval of the meeting summary from April, and then we'll go into a discussion on best practices for program design with Tim for about 30 minutes. And then the balance of our time is dedicated to a working session. We have a lot of information in here. This is going to be a discussion-rich portion of the agenda today. We want to look at some topics of interest from past conversations, connect those conversations to development of your draft recommendations report, specifically related to funding gaps and barriers and tax incentives. And as always, before we close out, we'll make space for general public comment on anything related to task force business. Camille, you got a bit of background noise. I think.
Yeah, I apologize. There's construction work happening outside the door. I know. So, okay, sorry.
No problem. All right, quick roll call to establish quorum. Member Nakahara.
Present.
Member Leah Schwartzman.
Present.
Member Thea Rittenhouse.
Present.
Quorum is established. 3 out of our 5 subcommittee members are here. The 2 absent members are members Doria Robinson and Darlene Franco. Okay, first item of business, approval of the April 7th meeting summary. Would any subcommittee members like me to pull up the draft to review? And do you have any feedback or proposed edits? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the draft summary as written?
I so move to approve the draft summary as written.
Thank you, James. Is there a second?
Sure.
Thank you, Member Schwartzman. Let's see if there's any public comments on the meeting summary. Not seeing any. Let's call the question. There is a motion to approve by Member Nakahara, seconded by Member Schwartzman. If you are in favor, please say aye, oppose, nay, or abstain. Member Nakahara.
Aye.
Member Schwartzman.
Aye.
Member Rittenhouse.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. The meeting summary is approved. We will finalize that and post it to the project website promptly next week. Thank you, everyone. Okay. First session, discussion, best practices for program design. We are happy to welcome Tim Bryant with the California Department of Conservation. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Did you want me to speak now real briefly before you go to the next slide? Is this for...
You tell me when to advance. The next slide has our discussion questions. I didn't know if you wanted any foundational opening commentary.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you to the subcommittee for taking the time here to consider our questions. We really appreciate your thoughts and perspective here. Just real quick, briefly, in terms of updates on the budget front and the legislative front, I'm told that really there's no new news from the last time that the committee had invited our division director to speak. We're still awaiting legislative guidance. Sounds like that might be forthcoming. And then the governor's budget still doesn't appear to have any funding yet for the program, unfortunately. But nonetheless, we're trying to, as time allows, exploring how the program could be structured, different concepts, trying to, like today, kind of get feedback from those who have that sort of expertise. So again, thank you. And and I work as a grant manager at the Department of Conservation. So I work on our various conservation programs, the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, California Farmland Conservancy Program, and others. And so, yeah, so I'm at the staff level and the nuts and bolts level of kind of how this sort of program could work. And I will leave it at that. So if you don't mind advancing the slide, we'll see. We have 3 questions here. Megan, I don't know if they need to be read or not, but we have 3 here, and the first relates to the resale provision. Well, I can kind of touch base on real quick. The first relates to the resale provisions mentioned in the climate bill, such as like the affordability provisions, preemptive purchase rights, shared appreciation. These are tools that we at the department have not used with our existing programs. We don't have a lot of familiarity with them. Of course, we've done some research on how they have worked in other states and such. But so one question is if there's some familiarity with these tools or history with them, if there are any ideas about how they might be best utilized for this program. The second question is in terms of the sort of when it comes to these transactions, if there's what sort of service providers could we encourage landowners to engage in to help them be successful with their farming business, such as business advisors, and researchers. Those aren't typically ones that we can reimburse for in our other programs, but it would be a different program that we'd want to really encourage the success of the landowners at the back end. And then lastly, property size. If there's what are the pros and cons, I guess, of maybe having a maximum, whether it be 10, 20, 15, or 500, which is what a number we've seen that's in that AB 524. So thank you for your thoughts on these. Yeah, I'm ready to listen, to take some notes. So.
Thanks, Tim. Does anyone want to pick a question to start with, or should we go down the list? Starting with question 1.
I feel pretty comfortable sharing some comments on question 2.
Let's hear it. Kick us off, James.
Also recognizing the Leah is frozen and then disappeared, but I think that might be like a Wi-Fi thing.
Yes, we did lose her. I'm sure she'll plug right back in.
So Tim, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for the work that you all are doing at the DOC. In terms of support, there are, I would say there's several different types of kind of support technical assistance providers that exist throughout the state. Some are fully independent nonprofits, others are connected to SPDCs, resource conservation districts, but there is a just kind of widely recognized fact that there's not enough technical assistance providers for the volume of small scale farmers, new and beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers who would need those resources. While I'm less familiar with it in the tribal community, I think it's probably would be similarly true. And in terms, so let's see, and it kind of varies around, like I can speak to the work that we do at Kitchen Table Advisors, which is a nonprofit that supports socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. Like we center on 7 different learning areas around business competency that help, beginning farmers kind of develop their organizational strength and robustness from a financial planning standpoint, access to capital loans, all of those things. And as relates to this specific question, like a large part of that effort goes into prepping and planning for land tenure and purchase, whether that's through private sellers, land trusts, etc. So I'll stop there because, yeah, and also like very much welcome follow-up questions too.
Yeah, thank you. Got that.
Can I note Thea's question quickly and answer it, chat? So Thea, the question just, I don't know if you want to vocalize it, but is the goal here to provide feedback on funding that is called out in Prop 4? Is that right? That's your question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of how the way I see it is how DOC might structure its guidelines in terms of implementing a future, this future program funded through Prop 4.
Yeah, I think so Shauna came to the task force meeting, Shauna Atherton Bauer from DOC in May. And in that conversation, there were a lot of ideas shared that Tim and Shauna had a discussion about, and then these were some sort of follow-up ideas to discuss with you all. And yeah, thanks Tim for clarifying that right now there is no existing program. This is just rather while you as task force members are convening, the opportunity to get your general guidelines on what would be best practices for any program that might be created. I hope that answers your question, Thea.
It does. I think, from my vantage point as this working already for another state agency, I think there will be ample opportunities for myself and CDFA to provide this type of input once the funding is solidified in the timeline. And I hope that the Land Equity Task Force can continue to engage with DOC through the public engagement process, as that's probably going to extend beyond the timeline of our task force. So I'm going to defer to James and Leah first here to provide if you're seeking input here initially. So just because I feel like I will have other avenues to engage with DOC, and frankly, I'm already having conversations, with other CDFA staff and others related to this. So I'm going to defer to the other members here for their thoughts.
Leah, I know you're having internet issues. If you need to join by phone, also, I think that's workable. You won't be able to see the screen. But do you have any feedback on any of these discussion questions? We lost her.
Until we get Leah back, I'm happy to take another to kind of sit. I was thinking about how I was answering question 2, and I think the important thing to get across is also that most people don't have any support with land tenure. Like the great majority of new and beginning farmers, the kind of farmers laid out in this question, like they don't have any real support for land tenure. The ones that do rely on the type of NGO or quasi governmental organizations like SBDCs and RCDs. And then there's like CAF, FarmLink, KTA, lots of other organizations throughout the state that I'm not naming that support farmers and ranchers with getting access to, I mean, when you say land tenure here, I'm reading into that, like, once you have the land, how do you develop, manage it, sustainable practices, all those things. CCOF I would put in there too. So there are lots of organizations working to support land tenure for growers. It's just there's not enough, in my opinion. and there's also kind of a not a coordinated approach. So it's kind of like whoever people can get is who they're able to work with in most cases.
Leah, how's your audio? Are you with us?
I'm not sure. I keep getting kicked off, guys, so I'm sorry.
We hear you.
I've tied to my phone, but I've got like, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. We can.
I can barely hear you. I've got like one.
Okay, tough. We might not be able to engage with Leah very successfully at the moment. I don't know, where do you guys want to take this conversation?
I'm also happy to comment very briefly on question 3, in that I think that's a really big question because there's so many different implications on property size and yeah, I just think that's like it's if there was a narrower framing of like a specific part of land tenure and access, that would be easier for me to kind of think about a possible answer response to.
Yeah, well, just some of the limited research I've done from those entities that here in California they may have explored this. It's and done research and interviews and such. It seems like there's a preference for smaller farms, to get their foot in the door. And I, knowing that there's probably going to be, depending where you are in the state, there's going to be some, variation there in terms of what's the ideal size for new farmers. But it could be a way to I guess differentiate this program from others. If it is going to be, focus more on small properties. Just curious if they're having a maximum size, then might be worth considering, and just again in the interest to kind of favor new and beginning farmers and encourage. But again, it's farmers and ranchers, and it's a statewide program, so might be a bit of a challenge.
Certainly,
Tim, there are a very high percentage of small scale farmers in California. I think that's why there's a tendency to focus on small scale agriculture, because that is the majority of producers in the state. Although the larger scale farmers and ranchers also occupy the largest amount of land, the diversity and number of small scale producers in the state of California is an overwhelmingly large percentage. Doesn't mean that they have to be new or beginning. Those are often conflated. I'll note that CDFA has a small scale producer advisory committee, and we are starting to tackle the idea of creating a state definition for small scale agriculture. This will be something that's not going to likely align well with the timeline, because it will take a little bit longer, because there are so many diverse types of producers and scales and crops grown in California. But currently we don't have a state definition. It's only the federal definition, which is gross annual income. It doesn't say anything about size of operation. Acreage, excuse me.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you saw the chat, but because of Leah's internet issues, she was just offering to schedule a conversation with you to chat about this. Okay, I mean, you have an audience here, Tim. Any other follow-up questions that you wanted to explore with James and Thea and Leah?
Yeah, other than, just the first question I know is kind of a tough one, but it's one we've been trying to do a bit more research on in terms of, to me, it seems like having resale provisions would be an important part of kind of ensuring land access and tenure going forward. But seems to be, these tools don't seem super common in California, to my knowledge. We've been kind of struggling to find, I guess, those that are implementing these tools. I'm come across those that are exploring it and kind of developing those tools, but and so that even though they're very important, will be very important, it's just not seeing a lot out there here in California. So if there's any awareness of those that might be using these tools or working on them, that would be helpful.
FarmLink is exploring these
Yeah.
preemptive purchase rates and shared appreciation. Diving into a project, timeline should produce some recommendations by the end of the year, but keeping in mind that these are recommendations for us as a community development financial institution. So they're going to be mainly focused around incorporating these documentation into our loan manual and documentation, and less from our agreement building perspective, although this is in cooperation with institutional landholders and land trusts. So there's definitely something that could be gleaned from there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other thoughts from Thea or James?
The only thought I'm thinking back to some of the presentations that we've had at our task force meetings around some of these. I want to say like from Dr. Kalfa's presentation, perhaps, about some models that are working well in the UK and Europe. But besides what Leah shared, yeah, I can't speak to that one as much, but I feel like we have had exposure to examples of affordability provisions, the preemptive rights, and the shared appreciation that that were presented to us through. And I don't want to add anything to staff's already enormous amount of workload, but I'm curious if maybe we could reference some of those slides or something at some point in the future. Or like forward those to, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for noting that, James. Tim, in February, Adam Kahlo came and gave a presentation to, I think, James, that's what you're referencing, a presentation to the task force about what's happening with the Scottish Land Commission, and then I think also mentioned a couple other examples, one in France. And so obviously those are international examples, but you can either refer back to our briefing packet from that February task force meeting, would have some links to information there, or the slides are all online as well. So that could be another place to take a look, Tim.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, go on.
Oh, I was just going to ask whether James, Leah, and Thea have questions for Tim. And I know, Tim, not to put you on the spot, and obviously there are a lot of questions that would be difficult to answer in this moment, but just noting that, you know, this is an opportunity to connect. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
I feel like all the questions I have are going to come up once more shoes drop around what's going on, like the development of the climate bond stuff, but I don't know. Yeah, can't think of any specific questions right now.
Thanks. Okay.
All right then. Maybe we are wrapping up this session with Tim. Can we check to see if there are public comments?
Yes.
Practices discussion.
I do not see any hands raised. Give me one moment. And there are no public comments for this.
Okay. Tim, thank you for making the time to join us this afternoon.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Great.
Thank you, Tim.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, team, working session. I am going to kick it over to Camille to give us some framing remarks here. Camille, tell me when you would like me to advance slides.
Yes. So thank you all for that conversation with Tim that we just had. We are now transitioning to a moment to think about where the report currently stands, knowing that working groups are currently revising, thinking through language, but I wanted to make sure that we took stock of the conversations this subcommittee has had and make sure that they are in the report where they should be and in the way that you want them to be. So to prepare the next few slides, which are pretty text heavy, you'll see very soon, what I did was I went through all past meetings, including presentations you've heard, like from David Mancera or other conversations that we've had, and did my best to map out the issues, the considerations that you as a subcommittee have been talking about, and then whether and how those appear in the draft report, so that you could, as a subcommittee, start to see the body of work that you have done. As you all know, your subcommittee doesn't exactly map onto a singular goal. I think the one that it most easily maps onto is the goal 7 about the increased access, fair access to public funding. But of course, the issue of finance is much bigger than just that. So wanted to make sure we had a kind of landscape level view of your contributions. I'm going to start the next slide, so Megan, go ahead, you can move forward. I'm going to start, oh, well, there you go. I have another talking slide. Start the next slides with ideas that have come up and that are somehow represented in the draft report. But then we will get to some ideas that, as far as my read, are not yet in the draft report at all. So the question for today is the existing language doing the work you'd like it to do? And then for some ideas that aren't in the report at all, do you know how you want to get them in there? Or is it something that is, it doesn't necessarily belong in the report itself? So that's kind of our goal. And the last thing we'll do, tax incentives is kind of a piece of this. We have a tax incentive working group. James and Leah have been working on that. So we can kind of hear an update on that. There's some new ideas there. So that'll be kind of the last piece of this conversation. Any immediate questions or thoughts, or should we just jump right into all this lovely text? Jump in? Okay, let's do it. Please, Megan, thank you. Okay, so you're gonna see a couple of slides like this. And what I've done is on the left, you'll see what this subcommittee has talked about. And then on the right, you'll see where it is included in some way in the report. And this very first one, I actually am going to ask for Thea's assistance with. I know in our last subcommittee meeting, when we were reviewing the outcomes of the grant program analysis that Tessa led, one of the things that was noted was that there are very few programs that fund land acquisition that go directly to individuals, to for-profit businesses. And at that time, there was a point about CDFA does have programs that fund for-profit businesses, just maybe not for land acquisition. And so I asked Thea if she wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more knowledge on that frame, on those programs that are designed that way, to see whether this subcommittee has further ideas or ways that you might want to design recommendations. So Thea, I don't know if you just want to maybe start by sharing for you what you see that kind of gap that's identified, and whether you have any ideas on that based on your experience.
Sure. Thanks, Camille. Yeah, and I know James and Leah, you're both in this space as well. So I'll try not to say something that isn't already obvious to you both. But I think that state agencies particularly, it's state and federal and or foundation support is typically it's not as flexible in terms of going to an individual person. It does depend on, the intent of a legislation or mandate that creates the funding. But in many cases, we're not able to actually fund direct individuals. Where that's different is in cases of our climate smart ag programs, which are incentive programs, and USDA, of course, has their similar program with their EQIP funds that go directly to farmers. Now, farmers have to, report that income. They get cost share assistance. Those are models that do work to flow funds directly to an individual business. But it is not as common to have a program that actually goes directly to an individual business. I think that the flexibility becomes, and again, I don't think that there's a parallel with land acquisition, which is kind of the tricky piece here. Unless Leah and James, of another example. But particularly for state and federal funding, we're able to help incentivize farmers to implement conservation practices because it's in alignment with the state of California's climate goals. I think that making that same argument for purchase of land might be more difficult. But not that it couldn't happen. But I think that what's been talked about at the task force is like an actual program to directly fund farmers, and with Prop 4, the climate bond, Tim was just here talking about the program at DOC, which will in fact provide something like that directly to, actually not directly to, through a nonprofit intermediary. So that's another mechanism that CDFA has utilized, a block grant model where local organizations are then sub-granting dollars to individuals with the same reporting requirements and the same responsibilities, but it enables individuals to then receive money directly from the organization rather than applying to the state. That does tend to address issues or questions of barriers related to citizenship status or other types of scenarios, trust, communication, barriers which in the past have been prohibited or inhibited individual farmers from applying. Is there anything that you wanted me to more specifically focus on? Because I think James and Leah already kind of know this world.
No, I think that's really helpful. Thank you for all of that, Thea. I'm wondering, like, with all that helpful background, like you just shared, whether and how that issue should be called out, if at all, in your recommendations. So the two things that I pulled out as like, neither one of them are necessarily going directly to farmers, right? You could, if you wanted to insert that guidance, you could. But I think, Thea, to the points you were just raising, there's a lot of questions about different obligations attached to funding, different requirements for that funding that might make that call out difficult for you all to consider. So I guess my question on top of what you just shared, Thea, and James and Leah, interested to hear from you. Are there ways that you actually want to tailor some of the ideas in your report to better address these existing limitations, or not, I guess, is maybe the question to pose here.
What I'll say from the state perspective, and this is a topic that is still like new and everyone's talking about and trying to figure out what is possible. We run into the issue of gift of state funds.
Right.
So that's something that supporting land acquisition or related costs, down payments, legal fees, all of those are still kind of being legal folks are looking at that to see how that might be possible. So it's hard for me to say whether there's not a definitive answer right now. But I think those two goals are ways that I think that they are possible.
As written.
But I'm not a lawyer, so I can't, make that decision.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that context. That was helpful. I mean, what I'm curious about, I think in lieu of a very specific idea, keeping things broad is okay, as long as we know that it's feasible, in the long run, for both of these goals. The thing I'm curious about would be specific to that, benefit, the state giving a benefit to an individual not being okay. If there are enough kind of provisos around it achieving either climate or sustainable agricultural practices type thing, and equity metrics in there, would that then kind of move it out of the realm of this is the state giving a private benefit to an individual, and more the state recognizes that an individual needs access to land and stable tenure in order to develop a resilient, sustainable agricultural business. And so that's the benefit is on securing the land in perpetuity with an easement of some kind or something like that. And these built-in provisos around practices and, inputs or things like that. I'm just this, and this is a question for a lawyer, but would that move it far enough out of the benefit zone? My hunch is no, but I don't know. So that's,
well, yes, that's a big question. I do think that, of course, these align with our natural working lands initiatives, many of the climate goals, the ag land conservation goals of the state also. But whether or not that could be a payment for per individual to buy land is still the question. Right. There's other mechanisms like the SALC program, which Shauna came and talked to us about, that funds land trust to then sub grant or have stable land tenure, leasing, long-term leases. Those models seem to be less risk for the state, or less in that gift of public funds world.
I also don't know where this. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you were describing how potentially there could be a block model too, where NGOs, are kind of intermediaries. I don't think we could write this into the recommendation, but I think there's an opportunity in a lot of this, it feels like, for co-development of these funds through both private and public funding streams. And so I'm curious about not that this could be a rule that has to happen, but I think there could be like a real force multiplier of it's like, okay, there's a bunch of block grants going out to a bunch of organizations in the state, or a few, with the expectation that there's also like a capital campaign supporting that from those organizations to match that funding or something, to give it the robustness that it needs to actually kind of support that second goal of like, because like state fund to support land acquisition, that's a really big pot of money. State fund to support land acquisition by supporting down payment assistance, if there's matches on the block grant, like that to me is like, that could maybe make a big shift. Because the other thing that like I hear a lot from farmers is like, it's not the monthly that's the issue, it's the down. And it's just like, we need help with the down. So yeah, I don't know where that fits, but I wanted to flag it as something interesting for the future. Everybody's screen's frozen except for Megan's. Oh wait, no, everyone's back. Okay.
Yeah, I think that the public-private partnership would be important, and I don't know if that's already in the report somewhere, Camille. But
Yeah.
like a revolving loan fund, a fund where it could be, a combination like James was saying. I think that's key.
Yeah, I don't know that it has, if you'll scroll forward a slide, Megan, actually, just interested to see whether there's something, outcomes are not well understood, mismatch between pace of land transactions. That's another place where maybe that private public partnership might be helpful, but there is nothing there right now. If you'll go one more, Megan, for me. I'm sorry, everyone, you're looking forward and then we'll come. No, sorry, there you go. Perhaps this last one, partnerships are place-based and require regional relationships and local support. There's your block grant comment. But then otherwise, it's just quite a few recommendations about funding technical assistance to support very specific kind of needs. I don't think private-public partnerships are called out right now in your recommendations. So that might be some language that you might want to at least come up with some form of what that recommendation would be. And then of course we can continue tailoring, finessing that idea.
That makes, I mean, I think it should be a both and for like, we inside out, outside in, both and like we need more of the technical assistance. We also need more funding to directly appropriate to producers who want to purchase. So I think including somewhere some language around public-private and how that could be a force multiplier for these funds, specifically like calling out that it's not just a public-private partnership to distribute, it's a public-private partnership to raise funds too. Or I don't know. I mean, I feel like I need to investigate that more before I say that wholly is like the only language there that I'd support, but we should put something in there about that.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's sort of context or if there is a specific recommendation for governor and legislature of like about facilitating this public-private. And what I'm noting now is an interest in figuring out what that actual recommendation might be. Although I don't know, does someone have an immediate response? Like what, given the audience, do you already kind of know what would be needed to facilitate those? And if not, it can be an exploratory question.
I think exploratory and maybe something for the advisory committee to take a stab at too before our next meeting, if they can, if there's somebody on the team who that's in
I
their
think
will.
so, yeah.
It's mostly like that there will be flexibility to allow for public-private partnerships when there's barriers that the state can't provide, that they can't do. Then there's opportunities to like a match or contribution. I don't know what you want to call it, but I don't know if that will address the legal issues. That's a question for legal staff. Maybe the advisory committee too, but I think that
okay.
Yes, understanding where that risk is, where that conflict is, I don't think there's as much of a conflict with a revolving loan fund as there is a direct grant.
Yeah, Megan, I'm sorry, will you go back to that first slide again for us? Because I do, oh, Leah, go ahead.
I think I'm back.
Hi.
Okay. No, I was just a couple, too many thoughts as I've had to be quiet. But in terms of revolving loan fund, I know that in a couple of places sprinkled throughout here, we've introduced the idea of loans that could be forgivable.
Mhm.
And I was having a conversation with Brett at the FarmLink team yesterday about how those really kind of skirt the border between being a loan and being a grant. And I don't know if we might need a little further guidance on kind of where that might have a crossover and have certain implications here as well. And just wanted to add in that we also had some conversations in the tax group around grants being tax exempt. So I don't know where that falls into various points of legality and guidance in here as well. But just flagging that, yes, I think in a lot of ways, revolving loan fund is cleaner. But then when we start to get creative with the revolving loan fund, we might start to get back into confusing waters again. Not saying that we shouldn't, think we should, but
So any thoughts based on that about how you might want to hint at this nuance, right? Like, how to address this nuance in the ideas that are in the report.
or is the like forgivable loan the way that we like circumvent the challenge around direct grants to individuals? Is that the secret sauce?
So just highlight, in other words, Leah, like that is the recommendation, really. Can you anchor a lot of these other ideas on that is maybe what you're proposing?
I don't know that I have the answer, and I don't know that I would want to erase the opportunity for grants or block grants. But it just might be another strategy, and we're throwing a lot of strategies at the wall here right now, and I think that's great.
Mhm.
And I think different regions will need different operative strategies to make this work. Like, I think what Thea you said about like when the state can't, like I think I take that to heart. And then I'm also like, there are places where the state won't be able to support. There will be places like, we've got these like lenders of last resort kind of thing, right? And like, what's the analogous support of that to places where all these other things fail? So I think having like a la carte menu options for regions, counties, to kind of be like, this is what we think would work best for us, whether that's partnering with the state, doing a private public combo. I think that at least in terms of like process down the road, it makes sense to me to like explore all these things and then have legal like scratch them out as we find out how tenable they are.
I do think I will say one thing, and I don't know if we'll be able to put this in here. I mean, I think in our interagency review, it will be a good to ask the question of like where this would be housed, because oftentimes it's, legislation is passed and programs are chosen to go certain places, whereas that agency might not have the expertise or staff, or, becomes more of a burden, an administrative burden, a cost to even set up a program like that. So I think suggesting for, if we could suggest an appropriate agency for this, it may have to be like iBank or another agency that I don't know, another agency that's the only one that's more set up to do that kind of transaction. I know there's the flip side of it is they maybe don't have any experience working with farmers or land, and then you run into maybe some similar problems, so maybe a partnership or something like that, but we could get into that specificity. Or maybe that's a question to ask during the interagency review, Camille, in terms of other state agencies' thoughts on standing up a program like that.
I agree with that. And I think like Prop 4 is a good example where it kind of put this burden on DOC. But it did leave open the opportunity for DOC to outsource the program. So I think allowing that, especially when it comes to running like a loan program, allowing qualified, financial institutions to take that on, can be smart, but having very specific requirements for that so that it is institutions that are being, asked to kind of outsource that, have the expertise to do that work, I think is important. I just want to maybe express my confusion. We have throughout our recommendations these concepts scattered: loan funds, grant programs, revolving funds, Aggie bonds. I feel like I'm seeing the slides kind of try to gather them in one place, but it's just it's hard to make recommendations on like specific programs within their buckets while we have them kind of parsed out into the different topic areas when we know that they cover the larger umbrella of the land access and equity challenge. So I don't know where that belongs or if that's helpful, if we like could start to consolidate all the recommendations under like, this is the grant program we are proposing, and here are the different, or if we are in fact proposing multiple grant programs and multiple, loan programs, and are they in fact separate things, or are we proposing singular things? And some of the things I've noticed are like, this might actually be a recommendation for making improvements to an existing program like SALC. So I just feel like I'm just trying to kind of put everything in their buckets, and it's challenging to visualize.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out, Leah. That was the kind of goal in making these slides, was so we could start to see the challenge and organization. Appreciate that. Can I ask a follow-up question to that? When you proposed another way of thinking through this, is it almost like right now we have this goal 7, ensure fair access to public funding for land acquisition? But I kind of hear you saying, is there a funding mechanism to advance every other goal? So like goal 1, return ancestral land, has here is the program we recommend you fund to do blank thing. Goal 2, I guess that's what I'm wondering if that's what you're thinking. It's like every goal has a little sub, here's how you're gonna get this, here's how you're gonna fund it idea. I just didn't know if that's what you were proposing. Or if instead you were actually proposing beefing up goal 7 to have all of the ideas.
I'm wondering if, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but we're mentioning these different kind of attributes of programs within each of our different goals. And I wonder if we need to have like a separate section that is, these are the 3 new programs that we are proposing. And goal 7.3 says, see, X new program, so that we kind of have both things. Like we see an entire program envisioned in its entirety in one place, and then it's referenced within the specific goal that it is meeting. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? It's Friday.
You are.
Yeah, I'm puzzling over this too. That's I mean, at least we could have, you know, like our recommendation for a grant program. You know, like we may not be able to, or may not want to spell out all the specific, like the minutia of it. But at least it would have, we know it would have this, this, and this. We already pretty much have that here, right? And then, I mean, I think I think it's good we could reference it in the other sections, that the more we can tie it together. I like that idea.
Because like when we're in section 3, we're talking about this grant program, let's say, and we're in section 4, we're talking about this grant program.
Mhm.
But really, we're talking about the same
The
program
same thing. Yeah.
doing
Mm,
different things, and it's unclear how many programs we're proposing
mm,
because, you know, there's so much overlap. So
right.
if we just kind of say, we're proposing, give it a name, I don't care, program 1, you know, and we reference that we are referring to program 1 subsection within goal 3 and program 1 subsection within goal 4 and within goal 7. So we know we're referencing a single program that is going to be tying in from different goals.
Mm,
And maybe we could be more specific in this 7, because I forgot all the record. Ensure fair access to public land. Like we know we are saying we need a grant program to ensure fair access.
mhm. I think I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
just
Tina.
quickly say, I think the reason why it's titled that is because, Leah, to a point you made earlier, underneath goal 7 is both improve the programs that exist and make some new ones. So I do think that
Okay.
there could be, that's not to say that the title of that goal should not change, but it again just hints at the complexity of both like addressing the landscape as it exists and then proposing something brand new that is a fix to some of those issues.
Mm.
I'm on board with all that. I mean, I think if we can call I mean, where the policy recommendations really suggest that we need something new, I think we need to be pretty explicit in what that new thing should look like. And just broadly for the report, I think there's a huge utility to drawing lines between the different kind of subsections, and where there is like a basket that I don't know how to do this visually is the problem, but like it's almost like a map, like a networking map or something that could exist at the end or in the appendix or something that actually draws it out. But I like what Leah said about like linking goals with specific programs that we think need to be built, and linking to programs that work as is and need more resources, and linking to programs that need to be tweaked slightly.
Mm.
And the tweak slightly, I'm like, low hang, like that's less important to me than the other, like this program works and here's a new one that we need to like create. Because that actually feels more tenable than like tweaking other, like it's hard to tweak other people's grant programs. Like it's like.
But
Right.
sorry, was someone gonna, Thea, were you gonna say something?
Well, just to, yeah, I mean, I like where this is going. Maybe again, for the August meeting, not to put anything off, like thinking about the bigger picture again with how this goal 7 fits into the other ones. And maybe we want to be more specific than just ensure fair access to public land. Maybe we should ensure this through doing X, Y, and Z. Being like, I think we'll have to have a balance between being specific and allowing for the legislature or the governor's office to be able to actually create a program that's going to work. We have this team of experts here. But I mean, the conversation with Tim earlier, like there's a lot of times when language gets inserted into legislation when an agency doesn't have the experience with doing that, and then they have to figure out how do we do
Mhm.
this? And so maybe we can be more nuanced in what we're saying so that it is a little more clear and less jargony, so that a state agency can actually implement that program to do what we're saying they should do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So maybe focus on the desired outcome, and then I think, as you've all been saying, there might be then some reference to guidance. Like, I think the menu of options ideas come up a few times. So I'm almost wondering, I think, Thea, to your point just now, if like the goals specify what the intention would be, you need to fund these kinds of activities because it's important for land access and tenure. Then there's maybe it's in the appendix, maybe there's some other way that there's actually like a spelled out, like if loan program, these things, if grant program, these things. I don't know if that gets a bit at the nuance that you're all describing.
I mean, I think it's good to have that level of detail that we can all provide as a reference. Also for technical assistance, I think that's the other piece of this we haven't gotten to, but I know it's in other parts of the report so far. And that's a huge, in my mind, in my experience, and just my perspective, technical assistance is a key thing that we need to spell out somehow. And maybe reference, like Lee was saying, be able to reference it throughout the report. Our model.
Well, what I'm hearing right now is that so we can maybe even go to the next slide, Megan, because what I'm kind of hearing is the ideas that are in here, like these feel like important ideas, but what's right now not adding up necessarily is how to provide a like clear and concise entry point into any of these ideas that kind of make it clear how these things fit together. So like, I think there have been a few different restructuring ideas, and that could vary in the specificity. I do worry about the time that the task force has together and how specific it could possibly get in terms of, here is a program we want you to create and we want it to look like this. But I do think that there are some like guiding ideas about preferred funding types and sources in here that maybe we just need a better mechanism for mapping in the report in some way. That's kind of what I'm hearing you all. I hope that's a good estimation. Does anyone want to have other, I mean, there are just more ideas here, as you all can see, like that kind of fit into this, things you've been talking about. They're spread throughout the report, mainly in goal 4 and goal 7 right now. And the next slide, Megan, if you'll go there, actually, it's one more. Here are things, and I think this top one is maybe what is also making this so difficult. This task subcommittee has identified that there's a lack of a cohesive funding strategy. And I think in some ways that is what you're all talking about, is even how to then address that in the report, which right now there is no direct recommendation to address that. Maybe that's the recommendation. So I'm not sure where you all would like to go, what feels like the most, these are ideas that I did not have an immediate, here's where there's some language about it. Because there are big ideas, I think, is why there's no immediate, like, and here is how we address it in the report, because these are very large ideas, or sometimes they're almost too specific. I think you have kind of both things happening on this slide.
I don't think it's possible to have comprehensive, cohesive, like funding strategies across entities and programs without a lot of money to build something to coordinate all that. That's like, I think it could happen like on a regional level, perhaps, but like statewide everywhere, I think that's like really, really challenging. I might be overreading that in like beyond just the funding landscape piece. So I'm like scared to put anything about that in the draft report. But the second one feels like something that could be like research determinative, like that can be studied. I know people have talked about like an observatory. I'm not saying we should put that in, but like that's something that I think maybe could be shored up. And then what that third one is, I think, is covered in several different pieces of the report around creating access to capital. So I feel like that one can be scratched a little bit.
Okay.
And then yeah, relationships are key, ecosystem of support, good terms with seller, like that's getting covered in some of the like tax stuff. It's getting covered in some of the land tenure stuff, really land tenure, not taxes so much, but you know, tenant bill of rights type thing.
That's helpful, James. Thanks for talking through those.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you'll actually go back one slide, Megan. Sorry, you're on slide that like one more. That unclear whether things, you know, whether this actually leads to secure tenure. What you said, James, did make me think about this first one. Outcomes of programs aren't well understood. Well, part of what's challenging about that is we don't know how well it then produces secure tenure. So this is right now in the draft, this goal 7.2.E, which had been part of the grant program's outcomes working group. So just you highlighted for me that there is a way in which that idea is at least partially addressed. It has to do with the research and knowledge about the effects of funding.
And that's like no small order, like establishing uniform metrics and evaluation processes, like that's a pretty big lift if we're doing it comprehensively across all the grant programs that are existing and the ones that we're kind of suggesting to be created. I could see that almost being too big, but yeah.
I will say that there have been, you know, some bills proposed in this session and some others that are trying to get at this, particularly demographics, not specifically for farmers, but there's also an effort by the Natural Resource Agency who's administering this climate bond dollars. They're also thinking about how to be uniform in collection of data and reporting, because there's a reporting requirements for how the dollars are spent and what it's spent on, and that's more stringent with the bond. I'm learning a lot about this. So there's an opportunity. So maybe it's not as big of a lift, is what I'm trying to say in terms of state agencies doing this work. It's just making it a priority because it's often siloed and, you know, hinders our understanding of the bigger picture. Otherwise, everything that James just said, I totally agree with on the last slide. I think everything he said. Yes.
I love it. The slide is resolved. One thing I did want to call that being on this slide, the mismatch between the pace of land transaction and then funding accessibility, that's come up in a few different ways in the subcommittee. The challenge of having capital at the ready, right? When you're up against maybe perhaps more powerful buyers, right? Thinking about the priority producers and land stewards. So some of those ideas are these preemptive rights that, you know, were very briefly mentioned by Tim earlier. But what I think is interesting right now in the way these goals appear, and then of course land linking programs, there's a few sub ideas there about making sure people are ready, have the kind of those partnerships that I mentioned in that last slide. But I do think that it's been mentioned, it's not only that there's a right of first refusal process or a first opportunity to purchase ordinance, but that there's actually funds for building capacity so when someone can jump when that does come their way. And so right now that is not built. I'm just wondering if you all have any kind of funding or proposal for that like immediacy idea that I don't know that it's appeared in here yet in any effective way. So yeah, Thea, go ahead.
Well, wasn't this already included in the conversation about land trusts doing this? Didn't we talk this, isn't that in one of our recommendations about a land trust as a model for like purchasing and then holding the land until an entity can then buy it or lease it?
It is. Does that feel like the kind of best mechanism that to propose to address this challenge?
Well, I'm not against that model.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if that's something the others here have comments on, or I don't know if it's like the only thing, but
I think it's like it's one option. We'd also talked about maybe NGOs being able to come in to purchase to do basically a similar type holding for land that's like the mismatch between pace of land transactions and funding accessibility. The solution to that in my mind is that there needs to be a third party that can come in to hold the land
Okay.
is an intermediary, and then transition it to an individual or a business or a collective or a group. And so we do talk about that in some other places.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes the most sense to like have it be a mixture of like land trusts, but it doesn't need to just be land trusts. It could be other organizations or like, I mean, yeah, I could see that making sense for several organizations to be able to be like, we'll take this on, we'll hold it. There's a question tied to all of this around like, are we kind of like, what is the value of easements and all this stuff? And like, how, like, because I don't know, it's certainly easier for a land trust to put like an affirmative agricultural easement on a piece of land than it is for a nonprofit, but I don't know how much more difficult it is. And Leah, I saw that you were coming off mute earlier, so I'm asking you that question, but also all your other thoughts too.
Yeah, many other thoughts. I may have missed the original question here, but land trusts certainly aren't the only organizations that can engage in a buy, protect, sell plus strategy. So, RCDs are equipped to do that and are piloting some of those projects across the state. There are nonprofits that are positioning themselves to be able to do that. There are community land trusts as well as other types of land trusts. And any of those entities that are not equipped to engage in the easement process can still partner with a land trust to put an easement on the property. And in some cases, a land trust does not want to both hold the easement and the land. So having that flexibility is important. And different entities want to hold land for different periods of time as well. So some of them want to hold it for a very short period of time. Some of them are willing to hold it long term. I think that the quality of the easement is important. Not all easements are created equal. And so we have, we maybe talked about a little bit of guidance around having easements be agricultural easements and be friendly to ag and to stewardship.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have a lot of that in here.
Great.
James, did I get what question were you actually asking me for
No,
that?
you answered it. I think you answered both my little question and the broader question.
I think what's so exciting to hear you all talking is that you're reflecting on the like complexity of the picture that you all have been painting as task force members over the past 2 years, but also recognizing as you're doing it that you are thinking about these things and they are in your report. So like that's actually a very good that's a very good outcome of having a conversation about trying to setting aside the fact that it can probably be better mapped in some way, and I do think that's a conversation to come back to. But just wanted to note that what I'm hearing you kind of say over, and it's like, we have talked about this, it's here, or this is what would do blank. And I think you should be feeling good about that feeling.
Yeah.
Sorry, Thea, I know you unmuted. Were you gonna say something?
I like the positive moment. I do still
Thanks,
think,
Camille.
yeah, that
I'm
initial,
oh, go ahead.
sorry. No, just the initial comment about like, we've thought about it, yes, but it's still in a bunch of
Yeah,
places. And I do still think we need to consolidate the proposed new programs, improvements to existing programs, and funding for existing programs, like more clearly.
right. So kind of a goal that is improve existing, fund, improve, and create new programs. I'll come up with the right, but there's like the three elements there. Put the money to it, make ones that exist better, and create some new ones.
I'm just going back to like, because this is the grants and resource subcommittee, so I'm just like the grants world. This mismatch here, like everything we're talking, like we were just talking about, is all yes, valid, important. In the grant world, what comes up is, and I think that maybe where this originally came from was where there's a funding opportunity and people don't have enough time to get the funding and the land is just, the land transaction come and gone. Even if we had a grant program that addressed land acquisition, that mismatch is important. So I think where that belongs potentially is within our recommendation for a grant program. How are we going to address, and maybe that third party buy, protect, sell is a model that would protect that. Because like the tribe said in Susanville, when we talked to them, they knew about a parcel. As soon as they showed interest in it, somebody came along and grabbed it, bought it outright, and they didn't have time to do that. If that were a grant that they were applying for to get the money to apply, then it would make it even longer. So I think maybe that's something that we can put this mismatch here into our proposed grant, or just to be considering here within our.
My understanding, and maybe this is a little bit of a solve for that, and I think we talked about it before. I don't remember if it is anywhere in here, but in developing new or making recommendations to existing grant programs that facilitate the acquisition of land for the purpose of putting easements on it and doing a buy, protect, sell plus, or frankly any acquisition projects, the timing is really important, and it's and remaining competitive in the market is really important, whether you're an institution or an individual. So a lot of the programs now, as they're designed, and perhaps even the ones to be designed in the future, need to call out that a property need not be identified to apply for funds.
Okay, right. Make sure that's part of your
And
proposal.
that's usually what's required now, is you have to identify the property and then apply for the funds. And then it takes 6 to 9 months, and then the property's gone. So what was the point? And that goes for loan programs and down payment assistance programs too, because you cannot be competitive. So there should just be like, you get, whether it's like you get X number of dollars and you can use up to that, or something like that, to apply for, rather than having to identify the properties first. That would help individuals and institutions remain competitive.
Almost like getting pre-approved and pre-qualified.
Yeah, and that I think that it also would support that sort of model where state funds, because state timelines of state funding aren't always that flexible. Sometimes they are, sometimes we get longer extended time frames to do that, in which we could create a model like that. But if it's not the case, and that mechanism we talked about, like the block grant model, that kind of adds in that cushion there. Or the public-private partnership too. So maybe, anyway.
This is a really, I think, helpful conversation to consider the sorts of guidance that would be in that kind of built out idea for a new program. Would be the kind of goal of making funding responsive, somehow, you know, having those funds at the ready so you can be responsive to opportunity. And then Thea, to your point, there might be different mechanisms to achieve that could be sort of proposed. Okay. I'm wondering if this, I think we haven't talked about tax incentives yet. We do have another half hour, so I think we should go there. But I'm just wondering if you three have a sense of what feels like the right step to make sure that the points you've made about needing to clarify the way the task force is approaching existing, and then also these new, better programs for which you have specific guidance. Do you have a sense of like how you want to move that forward, right? Does it, right now, goal 7 is a kind of messy version of that idea. Do you want the working group working on goal 7, of which Thea is a member, to think about this and kind of have some ideas about it ready for August? Do you want staff to put together a draft of what this like best practices appendix document looks like? Like, what do you want to make sure that your ideas expressed today keep going?
What were the options again?
I guess I'm wondering, can we ask maybe the working group working on goal 7, which right now is a little bit fuzzy. Thea, like, I know this immediately applies to you. To do a little bit of thought about that, reformulating these various components of the report so that they cohere a bit better around this kind of proposed program idea. Or do you want staff to take an attempt at building that out and then bring it to you all in August?
With the greatest of respect I can utter in a sentence, I would request that staff give it a shot first. I know there's a lot on top of everything else. And I think because you all have been so instrumental in structuring and organizing all of this for us, that I almost trust you a little bit more. Like, I'm a little bit like, I don't want to like screw it up, but I think having something to respond to is helpful. Or, I mean, alternatively, not that this doesn't make more work also, would be like kind of like a coherence subcommittee or something to try to like do that for the whole report. But I don't love that idea either, because we already have so many subcommittees and it's a lot to set up a subcommittee meeting.
Okay.
I'm also like very agnostic. I'm curious, Leah, what you all think.
Agnostic is fine too.
Thea, you're in group 7. I mean, what do you want? You want to be assigned that, or would you like to have staff help?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we have well, at least 2 more meetings already scheduled to look at goal 7. So we could just do our best, and whatever we don't get to in those 2 meetings, and staff could look at it before August.
Yeah.
Which is like 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, but we got it. We're gonna be positive. I think that would be maybe what we can do is a little bit of both of those options, right? So if staff can take that landscape level view of the report and kind of start to say, all right, we've got a little trail, we've got trails of this here, here, and here, here. Then we can make sure that that observation, that knowledge is either, if we have the time, kind of shared with that working group so that they can have those things be part of their knowledge, or it's just staff need to kind of have a sense of what we might propose to the task force in August to restructure in a way that gets at the ideas you've all discussed. So it might be a little bit of a combination of those ideas. But am I right though that this should move forward? This idea of trying to consolidate, clarify what exactly is being proposed in terms of funding this effort, that needs to be clarified and it needs to be clear throughout. So we can move that forward in a couple ways.
Yeah, and I think we have a call next week, right, Camille?
Yes.
So that should be fresh in my mind, hopefully. I won't forget everything this weekend. So yeah, we can just continue the conversation on the goal 7 piece and the grant program.
Yes. Thank you. I do know, so the last piece of this for us to turn to is still in the same agenda session is the tax incentives. So Megan, will you go forward? And I think what's Leah and James, you have been working there you go. So what this slide looks like is right now the way that taxes are mentioned, tax incentives are mentioned in is on the left in the current draft. And then Leah and James, you have been thinking through some other ideas about how to include tax incentives. And I think what's complicated about these is where they belong gets a little bit hard to figure out, like, are these in support of right now they're mainly in support of goal 4, which is the equitable transition of private land. That's right now where these are, except for that goal 7.3 to the point that things are a little bit everywhere. So just wanted to highlight this as an area of conversation. Leah and James, I didn't know if you both wanted to share. I know it's only Thea here who hasn't been part of those conversations, but anything you wanted to share about where this work is and how you imagine it moving forward, and in what way, and how might you see it fitting or being incorporated into the report itself?
I threw some notes in that doc that James, Caleb, and I were working on.
Okay.
I talked to my team. I'm trying to find it. Talked to the team a little bit about this the ideas to consider and assign the first one. And I wrote them in the doc, and I don't think that's not represented here, so I need to find what I wrote.
Yeah, apologies, Leah. I got this from Caleb. I think that in some ways what that's doing is if we are to establish a section of this report that says here are best practices for loan program design, I think this would be sort of part of that, right? This would be in support of the creation of a forgivable loan program. Is that correct? Just trying, tax incentives are tough because they're always like a mechanism to do a different goal. Like the goal is not necessarily tax incentives, right? They are a mechanism to achieve a goal. Go ahead, James.
Well, I was just gonna say that I think when we're talking about like programs, grants, loans, tax incentives kind of exist in a different space that
Right.
it's just like another menu item, right? Like it's
Okay.
another, that's how I look at it. But it's like my hope with these recommendations is that, you know, hopefully statewide, but like, well, yeah, like I hope that when people read this, they're like, okay, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this. And there's like a lot of options that can work for them in a given region, assuming they get adopted. And I think the tax incentives are this like macro bucket that does implicate all these other grant, loan, program ideas that we might have, even, you know, programs to set up funds, all that stuff. But I do think it kind of needs to live on its own. I mean, it can, yeah, there's so many different ways we could like show the report recommendations. Like it could all be like, everything that touches, but I like the kind of format that we have right now. It's just, I think we should be able to draw lines between different sections when relevant. That's just
Okay.
pretty open.
So that menu idea, you have sort of grant program, here's like our recommendations for a new grant program. Loan program, here's our recommendations for an effective loan program. Tax incentive program, here's our recommendations for an effective tax incentive program. It's kind of how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, although I don't know if I even think about it as a program, because it would just be like an adopted policy. Like it would,
Right.
they would be like amendments to state law or something, things like that.
Okay.
Or regional taxes, or like a county. But I mean, when I think of the menu concept, to me, most broadly, it is like it needs to be a la carte because the state is so diverse and different and complicated, but it needs to hit a metric level that actually achieves the outcome that we want. And I don't know exactly how to do all that. And I also don't know if it needs to do that, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
In the existing language in the draft report, we had a conversation with Caleb. We had some recommendations for 4.2A
Okay.
because we have a very similar provision within goal 4, 5.
Okay.
We made those recommendations within the working group with the intention that they could be crosswalked because we
We can
had
do that.
very similar things. So just providing clarity around what long-term is and that flexible leases doesn't have a definition that is pretty subjective. And still interested to learn more about 4.2B and how we can work with that. How tax law is affected by that. I want to say that there is some language that is being put through on the federal level that I saw recently, and I could not tell you what bill it was in.
Okay.
I'll try to look for it. And then yeah, tax. Yeah. Okay. So goal 7.3E, great. Then in the ideas to consider and assign, I made some recommendations for the first point to be split into two, kind of two different ideas happening here. So I've got amend California state tax code to make all income from grant programs for priority producers tax exempt. I think that we would need some clarification on the current status of some programs which are already tax exempt, such as EQIP Healthy Soil Sweep. So, taking into account some of the others that are not tax exempt, maybe some that are from block grants, through nonprofit organizations, or some of these ones that we're proposing here, just making sure we tack that fun add-on to it. And then the second bullet of splitting that up would be to amend California state tax code to allow forgivable loans originated from public or private financing to be tax exempt for priority producers on purchases related to operations, infrastructure, and land acquisition. So that is in the document recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you.
And yeah, I don't know if you want me to go through all of these. Like I made comments in this document.
No, that's fine, Leah. Thank you. And thanks for clarifying 4.2A as well. Caleb's out today, so these new updates have not come to me, but that does not mean they're there, and I appreciate that. I think more, we wanted to put this into the public, through a public setting, just in case there were any members of the subcommittee who had ideas to kind of inject into this conversation. And if there are not, it continues, right? And then it will come back to the task force in August, in whatever form it is.
Yeah, and I think we also decided in our working group for group 4 and 5. Are we 4 and 5 or are we 3 and 4?
Goals
3 and 5.
3 and 5? 3 and 5.
Yeah.
For 3 and 5.
Yeah.
We decided that the second bullet point here on ideas to consider and assign is not tax related, and we will deliberate on it still within the tenure working group.
Okay, okay, sounds good.
So,
Thank you. Okay, that sounds good. So it sounds like some new ideas are coming through on these things, and then we'll just make sure that they are included in their most developed form in that August draft. So for members of the public and all other task force members, the work will be brought back in that form in August. Any other like thoughts here though on these ideas or on how tax incentives can or should not, or should not, I guess, be incorporated? Okay. Well, those were the sort of slides I have prepared. I believe we made it. I'm very impressed with you all because I think we actually talked about kind of everything that I was hoping we could talk about. Just again, you're kind of seeing the stitching together project that is very complicated, as you all know, but without having these touch points with you all, it is very hard to figure out like where people's minds are at for priorities or for structures. And so I think there's some great suggestions and ideas that came through today. We'll keep moving that forward either as like either in its August draft or like as a proposal to talk about in August to see how the task force might want to move it forward. I think that's sort of all on my end. Did anybody have any other thoughts or want to go back to any of these ideas? Or is there something that's come up in the subcommittee that you're like, wait, we haven't even, you forgot that we wanted to address this and let's make sure it's on our list. Did you feel like your subcommittee conversations were addressed, I guess, today in some form?
Yes. For the I mean, I'm glad that we are talking more with the DOC, and it seems like a lot of things need to happen over the next 2 months before we actually know. Like the timing of all this is a little unfortunate, but I think I got most of my questions. I mean, the questions I have can't be answered right now. So yes, insofar as there are answerable questions, they were answered today.
Thanks, James. Okay. I think Megan, that's all on my and Aaliyah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, can you share this PowerPoint?
Yes, they actually all become public, but we can also, before they go through ADA remediation, I can just make sure that you have a copy of it.
Okay.
Would you like a copy, Leah?
They're really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, okay. I'm glad. I will say all of the PowerPoints end up online, but they have to go through ADA remediation. So that's why they often happen a bit late. So I will make sure that you all have a copy. Thank you very much, everybody. Really helpful.
Do we have to do a public commentary?
We sure do. See if there's any for working session.
I see no hands. Let me confirm nothing on the form. Nothing.
And any general public comment.
Sorry. Oh, right. That's me again. Oops. That was not great. There we go. That was not a great click into the Zoom count. No public comment.
Then we are all set. We will see you all at the August 13th, 14th task force meeting in Arcata, virtual option if you're attending via Publix. We'll get your PowerPoint out and meeting notes coming up in next week sometime. Thanks also for your continued work in your working groups. This is a lot dense conversation today on a Friday afternoon. Everyone's a rock star. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good seeing everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.
Okay, let's see. Stop. And it looks like we still have an attendance.